This is a lecture from Open Tuition. To benefit from the lecture, you should download the free lecture notes from opentuition.com.
Activity-based costing. Now you'll see on the first page an explanation and the various steps involved. But rather than read all that, you can read it afterwards. Let me explain by using the example that's on the second page, exercise 1. Because as I work through this, I'll effectively go through everything that's on the first page, but it's more obvious seen with figures than just talking. Also, do appreciate, and it is stated on the first page, that in your exam you can't be asked to do a whole example like this. It just wouldn't work for an objective test question. But any bit of this could be asked. And so to make sense of it, if we work through the full example, you'll have seen every little step that could be required. So, have a quick look at the exercise with me before we make a start. It says Una manufactures 3 products, A, B and C. And we've got details for each. I won't read them all now, but if you just look at product A, we're producing 20,000 units. The selling price, $20. We've got the materials cost. We know how many hours of labour each unit takes. And we know what the rate of pay is for labour. Below, we're told what the overheads are. Now, for the moment, forget that breakdown, setup, cost, receiving. I'll explain what all that is when we need it. But in total, we've overheads of 190,000. Finally, it gives us what's called cost driver data. Well, again, I'll explain what that is and how we deal with it when we get there. With the requirements, part A asks us to calculate the cost and hence profit per unit, absorbing all the overheads on the basis of labour hours. So in fact, that is what we were looking at in the last chapter. It's traditional absorption costing. Part B, though, we're going to rework the exercise, prepare our cost cards and profit per unit, but we're going to use activity-based costing, which, as you'll see and as I'll explain, is in principle perhaps a much better approach. So we're going to do it twice, but appreciate part A is just revision of the last chapter. It's traditional absorption costing, nothing to do with activity-based. It's part B, which is activity-based. It's in part B. I'll explain and we'll go through it all. Alright, let's do part A, which is, I think, pretty quick. We want to know the cost per unit, so I'll do the cost cards for each of the 3 products. A, B, C. We know the material cost. A is, where are we? A is $5 a unit, B is $10, C is $10. We know the labour. All right, a tiny bit of arithmetic, but A takes 2 hours. It says below it's $5 an hour. So for A, $10 a unit of labour. B and C are 1 hour each at $5. $5 a unit. There's no mention of any variable overheads. And if we were doing marginal costing, that would be the end of it. There would be the cost per unit. However, it asks us to absorb the fixed overheads. So to get the full absorption cost, well, we've got to bring in the fixed overheads per unit. And again, part A, it says absorb all the overheads on the basis of labour hours. And so, I'll come back, let's do my workings. To absorb them, we know what the total overheads are, 190,000. We're absorbing per labour hour, oh dear, oh dear. And so we need to know the total hours we're working. And how many are we working? Well, product A, we're making 20,000 units, and each one takes 2 hours. So working 40,000 hours on product A. Product B, we're making 25,000 units and each takes 1 hour. And product C, 2,000 units, again, each takes 1 hour. And so in total, we're working how many? 67,000 hours. And therefore the overhead absorption rate, 190,000 charged over 67,000 hours, comes to I get 2.836 per hour. Or 2.84 if you prefer. So there is our absorption rate. Now we can go back and finish the cost cards, charging the overheads at $2.80 per hour. So for product A, it's 2 hours at, I've forgotten the rate already, 2.836. So to product A, 2 times 2.836. Now at this stage, in fact, I'm going to keep everything to the nearest cent, which is what's likely to be the case in the exam. To the nearest cent, I get $5.67 per unit. Products B and C, it's 1 hour of labour, so 2.836, it's 2.84, again to the nearest cent. Which gives us a full cost, or an absorption cost per unit, for A of $20.67, for B $17.84, and for C $17.84. No problem. There's the cost. The question here also asks for the profit. Well, we know what the selling price per unit is. They all have a selling price of 20. And therefore, the profit per unit, product A, we're actually reporting a loss of 67 cents. Product B and C, a profit of, I think it's $2.16. And there we are. Nice and straightforward. And it does appear on this traditional costing that we've got a problem with A, that A is loss-making. And therefore, it would appear we should be looking to increase the selling price of A, or try and find ways of reducing the cost. Or maybe we'd even consider not making A at all. But A is our problem. Well, that is traditional absorption. I've already said, nice and straightforward. However, let's now turn it into activity-based and see why activity-based is a lot better an approach. We still need to absorb our fixed overheads to get the full cost, but if you look back at the question, it turns out that the overheads of 190,000 are being incurred for different reasons. Part of it, 90,000, is incurred because of setup costs. Now, what we mean by setup costs, we're making 3 products, but perhaps they're all being made on the same machine. And so the way it works is maybe we make a few hundred of A, and then we change the machines a bit and make a few Bs, and then change them again and make a few Cs, and then change them again and make some more As. Then maybe we're making them in batches, so it's not just 20,000 As at once. We may make 1,000 each time, 20 times. But every time we change the machines for the different product, we need to reset the machines, and perhaps we've got 5 men whose job it is to reset the machines, and we're paying them in total 90,000. So it's an overhead. Receiving. We've got lots of material coming in. We're using material for the products. Perhaps we've got several employees sat in a room receiving the material, checking it in. Perhaps 3 people paid 10,000 each. Or maybe there's a bit of cost to their office and so on. But one way or another, we're spending 30,000 overheads on checking in the material. Dispatch. When we've produced goods, we need to get them out of the factory. And maybe there's a cost involved in getting them out of the factory. Whether it's the cost of the staff or the cost of, again, their office or whatever. There's several costs involved, but in total 15,000. And finally, machining. Our last overhead here, we're told, is machining. The cost of running the machines to produce those 3 products. Well, in the traditional absorption, we weren't interested in the breakdown. We just took 190. We charged them all here on the basis of labour hours. What we do with activity-based, I think you'll see is immediately a better idea. We'll look at each overhead separately. And for each separate overhead, we will absorb it, but we'll absorb it in whatever seems the most sensible way for that particular overhead. Let me show you what I mean. So this is part B, appreciate. Where again, we want a cost per unit and a profit per unit, but we're going to use activity-based costing. So we'll set up our cost cards just like we did before. And so per unit, materials, this isn't affected. Each unit of A, it's the same question, appreciate, is $5. Each unit of B is 10, each unit of C is 10. There's labour, and again, just as before, A takes 2 hours at $5 an hour is $10 a unit. B and C take 1 hour. We want full cost per unit, so again we're going to have to add on our overheads. But as I said a moment ago, instead of just absorbing all of them the same way, which happened here to be labour hours, we'll look at each bit of overhead separately and decide the best way of absorbing it. So although I'll come back to my cost card later and finish it off, let's now turn to our workings for the overheads. And watch me carefully. We've got 190,000 to absorb, but we're going to do each one separately. So let's look first of all at setup costs. So forget the others for the moment. In total, we're spending 90,000 on setups. And we want to absorb it. I want to end up charging some of it to product A, some of it to B, some of it to C. And the way we'll do it, we'll say, well, what's causing, why are we having all these setups and needing all these men? Well, what's causing it is the number of times we set up. And we've got what we call cost driver data below. It tells us there how many setups we're making for each product. For product A, we're setting up the machines 10 times. For product C, we're only setting up the machines 2 times. And so what we'll do is we'll say, well, let's absorb, but let's say, what is the cost per setup? And then charge it on that basis. And see what I mean? I'll change colour here, make it a bit more interesting. Let's work out the cost per setup. We know how much we're spending in total, 90,000. How many setups are we making? Well, we're setting up 10 times for A, 13 times for B, 2 times for C. So in total, 10, 13, 2. If you add up, it comes to 25. So we're spending 90,000 on these men who do it. They're setting up machines 25 times. And so absorb it, and it's costing us 90,000 divided by 25. It's costing us 3,600 each time. Well, now let's charge our products. With 3 products, A, B and C. I'm going to charge them at 3,600 a setup. So in total, A needed 10 setups. And at 3,600 each time, that's 36,000. B needed 13 setups. At 3,600 each time, it comes to 46,800. And finally, C needs 2 setups. Again, at 3,600 each time, is 7,200. And of course, they do add up, I think. Ooh, 36, 82, 83, 99, yeah. Now, appreciate I haven't yet got an overhead cost per unit. I'll save that till the very end. If you wanted a cost per unit, you could write it down that A, you see, it's 36,000 in total for setups. A is 20,000 units produced. 36 divided by 20, it'd be $1.80 per unit. But I'm not going to do that yet. I'll wait until we get to the end, and then we will arrive at a total overhead cost per unit. So let's carry on the same way with all the overheads. The next one, receiving. In total, 30,000. And look at the data below. What would seem the most sensible way of charging the receiving? I said it's perhaps the cost of several people and their office sitting there checking in goods when we receive. And what are we given? It says number of deliveries received. So that would seem the obvious one to choose. And so let's work out the cost per receipt. It's 30,000 in total. How many receipts are there? 10 plus 10 plus 2 is 22. 30,000 divided by 22 is 1364. Now, some people get upset about the rounding. Be patient with me. I'll tell you what I've done at the end, or why I've done it, sorry, at the end. If you want to go to more decimal places, do, but you'll see there isn't actually a need. Now let's charge it in the same way as before. So A has 10 receipts. At 1364 is 13,640. I'm not going to show workings for all of them, I shouldn't need. B has 10 receipts, so at 1364, 13,640. C has 2 receipts, 2,728. Now, some people get terribly upset at this stage and say, oh, they don't add up, and they don't. It's wasting time. We've got 13,640 plus 13,640 plus 2,728. It's $8 different. Well, if it upsets you, by all means do it to more decimal places. But you will see when I come to the end of it that a few dollars is a rounding error, obviously, but a few dollars rounding isn't actually going to make any difference to our final result. So be patient with me there, but if it does upset you, by all means, be more precise, and then it would add up. Anyway, let's finish them off. What the next one? Dispatch. Oh, by now you may be racing ahead of me because it clearly, I think, is becoming rather repetitive. But what's dispatch going to be? Oh, sorry, I haven't checked, but I think fairly obviously from those the information below, the number of orders dispatched, that is the way we're going to absorb them. Calculate a cost per dispatch. So the total expenditure, 15,000. In total, 60 dispatches. So the cost each time, 250. And here I certainly shouldn't need to show any workings, but the total cost, which I haven't written down, of 15. Each of them has 20 dispatches, and at $250 each, 20 times 250, it's 5,000. Now, I'm not stupid, because they all have the same number of dispatches, I could have just divided by 3 and put 5,000 straight away. But it's, as I said at the beginning, although you cannot be asked to do a complete example as an objective test question, any one bit of this could be asked, or in different questions, different bits. If you were asked for a cost per dispatch, obviously you need to work out that 250. Anyway, just one left here. Machining. The cost is 55,000. And how are we going to absorb? Well, again, on the information available, I don't think there's any choice. We'll have to do it on machine hours. I can't spell machining, I've just noticed. We'll have to do it on machine hours. And so we'll work out a cost per machine hour. Now here, be careful, it's a common mistake people make, especially if you're having to do more than one. We've done 3 here, and there's a danger your brain stops thinking. What too many people do, and if you're copying this down, don't copy this bit for the moment, because it's wrong, but they do it just like before, and they say, well, it's 55,000 in total. How many machine hours? 2 for A, 2 for B, 2 for C. They divide by 6 and off they go. Well, think about it, especially if you were racing ahead and did that. That's wrong. We are going to absorb over machine hours, 55,000. We're going to divide by machine hours. But the total machine hours aren't 2 for A, it's 2 hours per unit. And so we have a bit of workings to do. If I wanted a cost per machine hour, we need to know how many machine hours in total there are going to be. And so I do need a bit of workings. You see, product A, there are 20,000 units. Each one is 2 hours machine time. Product B is 25,000 units being produced. Each one of them takes 2 hours, which is another 50. And product C, 2,000 are being produced, again 2 hours each, a total of 4,000. So in total we're working 40, 90, 94,000 machine hours. So it's the same principle as the others, but clearly it takes a few seconds longer. But it does mean that therefore we need to charge at the rate of 55 divided by 94. .585. Again, there's a bit of rounding here, and I'm not going to repeat what I said before. You will see shortly a little bit of rounding will end up making no difference to the final result. Anyway, let's charge it. So to product A, it was 40,000 hours. Well, at 0.585 per hour, product A in total is charged with 23,400. Product B, 50,000 hours. Again at 0.585, 29,250. Product C, 4,000 hours. At 0.585 per hour is 2,340. Again, we've got a bit of rounding there. It doesn't quite add up, but again, you will see why shortly. I am not particularly bothered. If it upsets you, do it to more decimal places. And of course, then it will add up. All right, we've now done all of them. So let me just remove those workings now. You can replay the video if you lost them. It's getting messy. But as a result, we can add up and get the total overheads that go for each product. So you better check my addition here, but for A, 36,000, 13,640, 5,000, 23,400. I think it comes to a total of 78,040. For product B, 46,800 plus 13,640 plus 5,000 plus 29,250 comes to 94,690. And finally, for product C, $17,268. We're virtually there, but remember what I've done, forget the little bit of rounding difference. What I've done is split the total overheads now between the three products. But to finish it off, remember our cost cards, I wanted the cost per unit. And so, well, we know how many we're producing. A was 20,000 units, B was 25,000, C was 2,000. So surely to get an overhead cost per unit, if A costs 78,000 for 20,000 units, simply divide 78,040 divided by 20,000 comes to $3.90. Similarly for B, 94,690 in total, divide by production of 25,000 comes to $3.79. And finally for C, 17,268 divided by 2,000 comes to $8.63. And here, I think you can now see why I wasn't too worried about the rounding earlier. Because the cost cards, usually, unless you were told differently, we do to the nearest cent. Because of this dividing, you know, the 78,040, even if it should have been a few dollars higher or lower, when we come to divide to the nearest cent, it's not going to make any difference. Well, now we can finish it off. Go back to our cost cards. To A, it was 390. To B, I'll check in a minute. I think I remember right. I think it was 379. Let me check because I can't remember what C was. Yeah, B was 379. C was 863. And therefore, the total cost per unit now, A comes to $18.90. B comes to $18.79. And C comes to $23.63. If we were only asked for the costs, that would be it, but it does say the cost and therefore the profit per unit. Well, no mention of the selling prices being different. They were told us in the first table, the selling price per unit is $20 for each of them. And so on this approach, A's making a profit of $1.10 per unit. B's making a profit of $1.21. And C is making a loss of $3.63. And so what's happened? On a traditional approach, we said earlier, every question's different, but in this particular question, it was A we were worried about, B and C were nice and profitable. But I said, A, we're selling too cheaply. If it costs $20.67 to make, we should be selling at a higher price. It turns out, in fact, on an activity-based approach, that A isn't a problem. A is making a profit. B's making. C is the problem. It's C where we're selling too cheap. At a selling price of 20, it is loss-making. Now, as far as the arithmetic is concerned, there we are. For I think the third time, to ask you to do a whole exercise activity base just isn't practical in the exam. But each bit of that can be asked. Any one bit of my workings can be asked. Now, I'll stop this lecture here as it gets too long, but I will come back with a second lecture where we'll just discuss the effect of it, the relevance of it, because for the exam it's not just purely numbers that you need. So I'll pause there, but then, as I say, I'll come back immediately.